Need to check the names to avoid, then write the story. The band names are Helen, Daniel, Walter, Brittany, Margaret Holloway, Wesley, Theo, June, Adelaide Renner, Brennan, Vivian, Walden, Catherine Brennick, Marshall, Whitney, Constance, Serena, Grant, Rory, Paula, Claire, Oliver, Priya, Diane, Laurel, Nadine, Evan, James, Nora, Patricia, Lily, Ruth. I'll use Vivian, Naim, Kaim, Arjun, Chum, Diana, CEO, Nan Fung, Hyana, the CEO, Slunga 3, Margaret, Mun Fung Anu. Wait, Margaret is banned. Let me pick fresh names. Nachan, Shows, Chunga Fung, Derek In Kang, Show, and Derek In Kang, Anyong, Rosemary Amayi, Anyo, 3 EO, Tara Muck and O. None of these appear in the band list. Good. I had been married to my husband for 11 years before I found out that his mother already knew, not suspected, not guessed, knew. For almost 8 months, she had known that her son was sleeping with my boss, and she had sat across from me at Sunday dinners, passed me the bread basket, asked about my commute, and smiled like she hadn't swallowed a secret the size of a house. That's the part that still wakes me up sometimes, even now. Not what my husband did. People betray their spouses every day. But the architecture of it, the number of people who had to stay quiet, who looked me in the eye and chose silence, that's the thing I keep turning over. That's what I want to tell you about. My name is Celeste. I'm 41 years old. At the time this happened, I was a senior financial analyst at Hargrove Capital Partners in Chicago. I had worked there for 9 years. I had built something real there, not just a salary, but a reputation. My boss, the woman I reported to directly, was named Tara. She was 45, recently divorced, the kind of woman who walked into a room and immediately became the room's center of gravity. She had recruited me herself years before, told me I had the sharpest instincts for risk assessment she'd ever seen in someone my age. I believed her. I trusted her. My husband Derek worked in brand strategy at a mid-size agency downtown. We had met in our late 20s at a mutual friend's dinner party, gotten married at 30, bought a condo in Lincoln Park, talked about kids in the abstract the way people do when they're not quite ready but think they probably will be someday. We had a good life. Comfortable. A little routine, maybe, but I'd never confuse comfort with unhappiness. I want to be honest about this because I've seen the way these stories get told, like the woman never saw it coming, like she was blind. I wasn't blind. I noticed things. I just explained them away, one by one, the way you do when you're not ready to know the truth yet. The first thing I noticed was the calendar. Derek used a shared Google Calendar so we could coordinate schedules. In early March, I was trying to plan a weekend trip to Michigan for our anniversary, and I pulled it up on my laptop. He had blocked off a Friday afternoon with client off-site, Naperville. Normal enough, but something made me click on it and the location was listed as a hotel. Not a conference center, a hotel. I told myself it was probably a working dinner that ran late. Corporate retreats happen at hotels. I genuinely believed that for about 3 weeks. Then in April, I came home early from a conference that got cut short. Our condo was empty. No note. Derek's car was in the garage. I called him and he answered immediately, said he was just walking around the neighborhood, needed some air. He was home 12 minutes later, slightly flushed, and I registered that he smelled like a different soap. Not our soap. I told myself he'd used the gym shower somewhere. He did have a gym bag in the car sometimes. I'm not telling you this to make myself look naive. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand the specific kind of loneliness that comes from suspecting something enormous while your life keeps moving forward at its normal pace. You still go to work, you still make dinner, you still sit on the couch and watch television with someone, and a part of your brain is quietly, methodically building a case you're not sure you want to finish. By May, I had a file. Not a physical file. Nothing dramatic. Just a folder on my personal laptop, password protected, where I had started keeping notes, dates, times, inconsistencies. The hotel in Naperville, a charge on our joint credit card for dinner at a restaurant I'd never been told about, on a Tuesday night when Derek said he'd worked late. A weekend trip to Cincinnati he took for a friend's birthday, where I later realized, looking at old texts, that the friend he named hadn't spoken to Derek in over a year. I hadn't yet connected it to Tara. That connection came later, and when it did, it came all at once, the way a picture comes into focus. It was a Thursday in late May. I was pulling together documentation for a quarterly review and needed to access a shared drive folder that Tara normally managed. She was traveling that week, or so I'd been told, and I had temporary admin access to pull the files I needed. I wasn't snooping. I want to be clear about that. I was doing my job. But the folder had subfolders I hadn't seen before. One of them was labeled with an abbreviation I didn't recognize. I clicked it and found expense reports, personal expense reports, not company ones, that Tara had been running through a client entertainment budget. The receipts were attached. The same hotel in Naperville, multiple dates, multiple charges for two. I sat at my desk for 4 minutes without moving. I know it was 4 minutes because I had a meeting notification that popped up at the end of that time. I closed the folder. I went to my meeting. I did not say a single word to anyone. That night, I did not confront my husband. I know that might seem strange, but here's what I understood in that moment. If I confronted Derek immediately, I would get his version. Defensive, controlled, whatever story he'd already prepared in case this day came. What I needed was the full picture first. Not because I was planning some elaborate revenge, because I needed to know the scope of what had happened before I decided what to do about it. So I kept going to work. I kept coming home. I kept passing the bread basket. Over the following 3 weeks, I built a documentation trail that any attorney would have been satisfied with. The expense reports I had stumbled across were only the beginning. Tara had approved a project bonus for a vendor account that I knew from my own analysis was structurally unnecessary, a bonus that had been routed unusually. I dug carefully. I was methodical. I flagged nothing yet. I simply documented. I also, during this time, found out about my mother-in-law. It happened by accident, the way the worst things do. I was at my in-laws' house in Evanston for a Sunday dinner, just me and my mother-in-law Rosemary, since Derek was stuck in traffic and my father-in-law had stepped out to the hardware store. Rosemary and I were in the kitchen and her phone buzzed on the counter. She reached for it quickly, but not quickly enough, and I saw the name on the screen before she turned it face down. It was Tara's name. Rosemary had Tara's personal cell number in her phone. I did not react. I have thought about this moment many times since. The way my body just kept moving, kept stirring the pot on the stove, kept nodding while Rosemary said something about Derek's commute. I don't know where that came from. Shock, maybe. Or maybe I'd already been practicing containment for weeks without knowing it. But I drove home that night with my hands very steady on the wheel, and I thought, she knows. She's known this whole time, and she has been sitting across from me at this table. I went home and I kept building my file. I want to stop here and tell you something true. I wasn't okay. I want to be honest about that because I've seen these stories told like the woman is some kind of emotionless chess player, perfectly composed from start to finish, and that's not how it was. There were nights I sat in our second bathroom with the door locked and cried until I couldn't breathe. There was a morning I stood in the shower so long the water went cold and I still didn't move. There was a lunch break where I walked to the lake and stood there for 40 minutes just watching the water because I couldn't make myself go back inside yet. I was grieving. I was grieving my marriage, my friendship with Tara, the version of my life I had believed in. I just wasn't ready to do it out loud yet. The decision point came in mid-June. I had known for 2 weeks by then that Derek and Tara had been seeing each other for approximately 8 months. I had documentation. And I had begun consulting quietly with a divorce attorney named Sandra who came recommended by a woman in my Pilates class who had gone through something similar 3 years before. Sandra told me several things I needed to hear. She told me to stop using the joint credit card for anything personal. She told me to open my own checking account, something I hadn't had since we married and combined everything. She told me to make sure I had copies of every financial document in the house. Mortgage, retirement accounts, his 401k statements that came to the house quarterly. I did all of it, quietly, over 2 weeks. Derek didn't notice because Derek wasn't looking at me that closely anymore. I think he'd stopped looking at me closely a while before that. The thing that finally moved me from waiting to acting was a phone call. I was working from home on a Wednesday and I overheard Derek in the next room on the phone. He didn't know I could hear. He was speaking quietly, but our condo has a strange acoustic sound carries along the hallway, and I heard enough. He was telling someone, I know it was her, that it would all be settled soon, that he was going to handle things on his end by July. July was 4 weeks away. I understood then that I wasn't gathering evidence for some future decision. The decision had been made. I was just the last one to know. I called Sandra that afternoon and we had a conversation I will remember for the rest of my life. She told me what I could do legally, what I was entitled to, and what the cleanest path forward looked like. I had questions. She had answers. By the end of that call, I had a plan. I also, that same week, sent a carefully worded email to the head of compliance at Hargrove Capital Partners, not from my work email, from a personal account. The email documented, with attached copies of records, the irregularities I had found in Tara's expense management and the vendor bonus routing. I included the dates, the receipts, the documentation trail I had spent 6 weeks building. I did not sign my name. I didn't need to. The document spoke clearly enough, and then I waited. Rosemary had, without my asking, decided to throw a dinner party. This was her pattern. She was a woman who expressed love and control through food and event planning, and the two were always somewhat tangled. She called it a midsummer family gathering, and told me she was inviting close family and a few friends. She wanted it at their house in Evanston, on the back deck, the last Saturday in June. I said yes. I said it would be lovely. I said I'd bring dessert. What I knew, because Fiona, Derek's sister, who had always been easier to read than she realized, had let it slip to me accidentally about 2 weeks prior, was that Tara was going to be at that dinner. Rosemary had decided, apparently, that it was time to bring everyone together. I think she believed that if she could arrange us all in the same domestic space, some version of an agreement would be reached. A civilized settlement. Mature people finding a mature arrangement. I had heard the word mature used in this context before. It had been used to describe what I should be willing to accept. The evening of Rosemary's dinner, I drove to Evanston alone. I was wearing a green dress I'd bought the week before. Nothing significant, just something I felt good in. I had a box of lemon bars from a bakery in my neighborhood in the passenger seat. When I arrived, Rosemary hugged me on the front steps. My father-in-law, Harold, shook my hand warmly. Fiona was there with her husband. 2 neighbors I'd met before were already on the deck with glasses of wine, and Tara was standing by the railing in a cream linen blazer, holding a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, and talking to Harold like this was perfectly natural. I watched Derek see me walk out onto the deck. I watched something move across his face that I cannot fully describe. Not guilt, exactly, more like calculation. Like he was recalibrating. I put the lemon bars down on the food table. I poured myself a glass of wine. I said hello to the neighbors. I did not speak to Tara directly. We sat down to dinner about 45 minutes later. Rosemary had made her rosemary chicken. She did this, used her own name as a kind of culinary signature, with roasted vegetables and a cold cucumber salad. It was very good. I ate. The conversation was careful for the first hour. Topics that circled the obvious thing and never landed on it. Sports, a neighborhood construction project, someone's upcoming vacation to Portugal. I participated. I asked questions. I refilled my water glass. It was Rosemary who finally moved toward it. She set down her fork about halfway through the main course and looked at me with an expression I can only describe as rehearsed compassion and said, "Celeste, I know this has been a difficult time. I think we all just want to find a way through this that works for everyone." I said, "That's kind of you, Rosemary." She continued. She talked about modern relationships and evolving definitions of commitment, and the phrase that I had been waiting for, the one I had predicted she would use, arrived right on schedule. "We hope you can be mature about this." Fiona looked at the table. Harold looked at the neighbors. The neighbors looked confused because they clearly hadn't been briefed. Derek said carefully, "We all care about you, Celeste. This doesn't have to be ugly." Tara said nothing. She looked at her wine glass. I took a breath. I reached into my bag, which was hanging on the back of my chair. I removed a white envelope and I placed it on the table in front of Derek. He looked at it. "You don't have to open it now," I said, "but I wanted you to have it tonight." He picked it up. He opened it. Inside were 2 documents. The first was a petition for divorce, already filed that Friday through Sandra's office. The second was a summary statement from my new individual bank account, which I had opened 3 weeks prior and into which I had moved my direct deposit and my personal savings. His name was not on it. There was a 3rd page. It was a printout of Tara's expense report irregularities with the vendor bonus routing highlighted in yellow. At the top I had written the date I had sent the anonymous compliance report and the name of the compliance officer who had received it. Derek read it slowly. Tara saw him reading. She saw his face change. She put down her wine glass. "The compliance report was submitted 3 weeks ago," I said. "I imagine HR will be in touch with you by the end of next week, Tara. I wanted you to have a heads up." I paused. That felt like the mature thing to do. No one at the table said anything for a moment. Then Derek said my name. He said it the way people say a word when they're not sure it still means what they think it means. "I want to be very clear," I said quietly, "that I have wished both of you well, genuinely. And I also want to be clear that I will not be attending anything framed as a family conversation about this going forward. If you need to reach me, Sandra's information is at the bottom of the 1st page." I stood up. I thanked Rosemary for dinner. I told Harold it was good to see him. I picked up my purse. Fiona, I noticed, was looking at me with something that might have been respect. I walked through the house, out the front door, and got into my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment with the engine off. The night was warm and the street was quiet, and through the front window of the house I could see the shape of people moving around, and I did not want to know what they were saying. I drove home. The divorce was finalized 7 months later. Derek contested nothing of substance, ultimately. I kept my retirement accounts. We sold the Lincoln Park condo and split the equity. It was not painless. Very few true things are. Tara was placed on administrative leave pending the compliance investigation 4 days after that dinner. She resigned 6 weeks later as part of a settlement agreement with the firm. I was not involved in that process directly, and I want to be clear that I did not fabricate anything in that compliance report. Everything I submitted was documented and accurate. The situation existed before I found it. I simply stopped looking away from it. I still work at Hargrove Capital. I was, quietly, promoted 8 months after Tara's departure to a position that carries more responsibility and a title I've been working toward for years. I don't know if those things are connected. I try not to think about it too much. Rosemary sent me a card on my birthday that first year after. It was a plain card, no printed message inside, just her handwriting. "I'm sorry, Celeste. I should have said something. I read it several times. I put it in a drawer. I haven't responded to it yet. I'm not sure I will. I don't think I've fully decided what that relationship means now, or what I want from it, or whether I want anything." Derek and Tara are, as far as I know, still together. I heard this through a mutual acquaintance, not from any deliberate searching on my part. I don't feel what I thought I would feel about that. Mostly I feel something quiet and flat when I think about it, like looking at a photograph of a place you once lived and recognizing it but not quite feeling it anymore. I live alone now, in a rental apartment in Roscoe Village that gets good light in the mornings. I have a cat named after a jazz musician because the woman at the shelter told me he had good timing. I run along the lake on Saturdays. I have dinner with friends. I am rebuilding something slowly, in the particular way you rebuild after you've finally stopped carrying something heavy. Not fast, and not always gracefully, but with a feeling underneath it all that the ground is solid. I am telling you this story not because I want you to admire me. I did not handle any of this perfectly. I made choices I'd make differently now, and I said things I regret, and I spent a lot of months unable to sleep through the night. But I want you to hear the part that nobody usually says out loud. The moment I stopped waiting for someone else to tell me the truth, the moment I decided to find it myself and act on it myself, that was the moment I stopped being afraid. You are allowed to be calm and still be furious. You are allowed to take your time and still be decisive. You are allowed to walk out of a dinner party and leave the breadbasket behind. I left mine on a table in Evanston, and I have not missed it once. I've thought a lot about the word mature since that night in Evanston. Rosemary used it like a gift she was offering me. Like she was handing me a way out of my own humiliation and calling it growth. Be mature, Celeste. Be the bigger person. Accept what is. And for a long time, longer than I'm comfortable admitting, I think I confused maturity with tolerance. I thought being strong meant absorbing things quietly, staying, not making a scene. What I learned the hard way, and the only way I think some things can actually be learned, is that real maturity has nothing to do with what you're willing to swallow. It has everything to do with what you refuse to. The night I found Tara's expense reports that Thursday in late May, when I sat at my desk for 4 minutes not moving, I had a choice. I could close the folder and go back to not knowing, which would have been easier in the short term and devastating in every term after. Or I could decide that I deserved the truth more than I needed the comfort of ignorance. I chose the truth. And then I chose to do something with it. That's the part nobody talks about when they tell these kinds of stories. The gap between knowing and acting. That gap is where most people get stuck, and I understand why. Acting on the truth costs something. It cost me my marriage, my friendship with Tara, my Sunday dinners in a house in Evanston that I had genuinely loved. Those losses were real. I'm not going to dress them up. But here's what I've come to believe. Sitting in my apartment in Roscoe Village on a Saturday morning with good light coming through the window, the people who deceived me were not undone by anything I did to them. They were undone by what they had already done. Derek and Tara made choices over 8 months that created consequences. Rosemary made a choice every single Sunday she passed me the breadbasket. I didn't manufacture their outcomes. I simply stopped protecting them from the ones they had already set in motion. That distinction matters to me. I don't want to be a person who acts out of cruelty or spite, and I don't think I was. What I did was document the truth, consult people who knew more than I did, and then act on what I knew at the moment I had enough information to act. There's nothing clever or cold about that. It's just what it looks like when you stop waiting for someone else to rescue you and decide to be a clear-eyed witness to your own life. What I'd say to anyone who finds themselves in a version of this, quietly building a file, crying in a bathroom with the door locked, standing by a lake unable to go back inside, is this: the ground is not disappearing under you. It only feels that way. Take your time. Get the full picture. Find a Sandra. And when you're ready, walk out of the dinner and leave the breadbasket behind. The calm you feel on the other side of that is not emptiness. It's the feeling of no longer carrying something that was never yours to carry in the first place.